The Georgia heat in July was a physical presence, a thick, woolen blanket soaked in humidity and the cloying sweetness of magnolia blooms. For Eleanor Whitethorn, standing on the veranda of Greenwood, it was the smell of triumph. At 48, she was the undisputed sovereign of 1,200 acres of prime cotton land in Liberty County, a widow of 5 years, and a woman who had stared into the abyss of financial ruin and not blinked. Greenwood itself was a testament to her willow-white pillared, Greek Revival mansion that glowed like a bone against the emerald flush of live oaks. It was not the largest plantation on the coast, but it was now, under her stewardship, one of the most profitable. The source of that profit moved in silent, rhythmic lines through the sea of white bowls in the far fields. 200 souls, legally termed property, there bent back the engine of her whirl. Eleanor's eyes, the cool gray of winter slate, swept over her domain. She was a handsome woman, her figure still straight, her dark hair only lightly threaded with silver, swept into a severe chignon. Her mourning dress, of the finest black silk, was a permanent uniform now, a symbol of respectability and power, not grief. She had mourned Silas Whitethorn for precisely the 6 weeks dictated by custom, then sold his favorite horses and converted his study into her accounting room. Her 2 sons, the heirs to all this, lounged in the shaded sitting room behind her, the clink of ice in their glasses a constant afternoon refrain. Jonathan, 24, was his father in miniature, broad-shouldered, with a florid handsomeness already softening into dissipation. He managed the day-to-day brutality of the plantation, the quotas, the punishments, the slave hire to the Savannah docks. He enjoyed it. William, 22, was different, slighter, with Eleanor's sharp features and intelligent eyes. He had returned from the University of Georgia with a head full of Enlightenment philosophy and a stomach that turned at the lashes crack. He spent his days in the library writing awkward poetry and reading Adam Smith, trying to reconcile the invisible hand of the market with the very visible chains. In his family's yard, the Savannah Courier predicts a bumper crop for the whole state. Jonathan's voice boomed from within. Prices will hold. We should clear another 15% this year. At what cost, Jonathan? William's softer reply followed. The fever in the quarters is worse. Dr. Clarkson said 3 more children last week. We're working them to death. We're working them to profit. Little brother, a dead-end asterisk is a loss. A weak one is a worse loss. Strength is all. It's a simple calculus. Eleanor listened, a faint, unreadable smile on her lips. William's conscience was a luxury like the French porcelain in her cabinet. It had to be displayed, but it must not be used. Her gaze drifted from the fields to the cluster of whitewashed cabins. Near the creek, the breeding quarters, separate from the main slave street. This was her true masterpiece, her secret calculus. Silas had been a traditionalist, buying new slaves at auction in Charleston when needed. But Eleanor, in her first year of sole stewardship, had seen the future. The transatlantic trade was banned, but the demand for slaves in the booming Deep South was insatiable. The price of a prime field hand had skyrocketed. The answer was not just in buying, but in producing. She had started systematically, like improving a bloodline of horses or hounds. She identified the strongest men and the healthiest, comeliest women. She offered extra rations, lighter duties, for those who paired and produced children. The results were good, but slow. Natural affections were inconvenient. Couples formed bonds, resisted being split for sale. Mortality among infants, despite her incentives, was frustratingly high. The terrible, brilliant idea had come to her 3 years ago, reading a distressing letter from her factor in New Orleans. The market here has a particular demand for fancy maids, Eleonora," he'd written, using the vulgar trade term for light-skinned enslaved women destined for concubinage, or the brothels of the French Quarter. Mulattoes, quadroons, octoroons. They fetch prices triple that of a field hand. If you had any such to offer, the returns would be extraordinary. She had looked up from the letter, her eyes traveling to the portrait of her fair-skinned, blue-eyed sons. A cold, clinical logic had assembled itself in her mind. The strongest, most durable genetic stock on the plantation was not in the quarters. It was flowing in the veins of the Whitethorn men. Combine that with the robust fertility of her chosen women, and you would not just get slaves. You would get premium, high-value assets. Children with the Whitethorn stature, their finer features, their lighter skin a commodity of rare worth. It was efficient. It was ingenious. It was utterly monstrous. Broaching it to Jonathan had been simple. He had laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Breed them myself, like a prize bull? Well, why not? They're ours to use, ain't they?" For him, it was an extension of his casual, cruel exploitation. Coupled with a perverse sense of dynastic pride, William had been the challenge. She had framed it not as lust, but as duty, as advanced husbandry. "It is for the survival of Greenwood, William, to secure your inheritance, to create a lineage of servants so superior they will make our name famous. It is a business transaction, a biological strategy, cleaner than the auctions, kinder than the breaking yards. They will live better lives here, born and raised." He had been violently sick. He had called her Medea. He had wept. But Eleanor was patient. She wielded the only weapon that mattered, his love for Greenwood, the land itself, and his latent, terrified desire to please her. She showed him the ledgers, the crushing debts his father had left. She spoke of losing the library, the land, their name. She isolated him from his few liberal friends in Savannah. Slowly, through a campaign of emotional siege, she broke him. His acquiescence was not enthusiastic like Jonathan's. It was a silent, shame-filled surrender. He agreed to participate only under the cover of darkness with a specific woman chosen by Eleanor, and only if he could drink himself into oblivion first. Eleanor's chosen instruments for this project were the young enslaved women. Sarah, 19, was the daughter of a Mondingo warrior sold into slavery decades before. She was tall, statuesque, with deep umber skin and a bearing of natural nobility. She was fiercely intelligent, had taught herself to read by studying the newspapers used to line drawers, and her spirit was an unbroken flame. She was matched with Jonathan Lilly, 17, was of mixed heritage already. Her father a white overseer long gone. She had skin the color of warm honey, delicate features, and a gentle, melancholic disposition. She played a haunting melody on a hollowed-out gourd flute, a talent William had once admired from afar. She was William's counterpart. They had been moved to a separate, slightly better-built cabin near the main house under the watchful eye of Cora, the aging midwife and herbalist who was Eleanor's most trusted and coerced accomplice. They were fed better, given lighter sewing work in the plantation loom house. But their prison was gilded. They were breeding stock. The first child was born to Sarah in the spring of 1845. The labor was long and brutal. Jonathan, in a drunken state, had been rougher than usual. Cora delivered the baby, a boy, in the stuffy cabin. He was undeniably healthy, with a shock of dark hair and features that held, even then, a disquieting echo of the Whitethorn line, the shape of Jonathan's jaw, the set of his own father's eyes. But his skin was a rich, smooth brown. Sarah's triumph. Eleanor visited the next day. She did not look at Sarah, lying exhausted on the pallet. She examined the infant like a farmer inspecting a new calf. She pinched his limbs, peered into his eyes. Adequate, she pronounced. Name him Isaac. He'll do for field work or a house servant. The next one will be better. You know what is required. Sarah turned her face to the wall, a silent tear tracing a path through the sweat on her temple. Her hatred for Eleanor, for Jonathan, for the child that was both her son and her torment, was a cold, hard stone in her chest. Lily's first child, a daughter, came 6 months later. William had been so steeped in whiskey he barely remembered the conception. He avoided the quarters for weeks after. The baby girl was lighter, with Lily's soft hair and a faint sprinkling of freckles. Eleanor was more pleased. A start, she said. Call her Rose. The system became a grotesque routine. Jonathan performed his duty with brutal, detached regularity. William's participation was a recurring nightmare, a cycle of resistance, maternal pressure, drunken compliance, and profound shame. He began spending longer periods in Savannah, gambling lightly, drinking heavily, seeking solace in the few philosophical societies that debated abolition in theoretical, distant terms. The plantation's fortunes soared. Eleanor's special stock began to bear financial fruit. A light-skinned boy of 4, with startling gray eyes fathered by Jonathan on a different woman, was sold to a Richmond banker for an astronomical sum. The banker wanted a pretty playmate for his own son. Eleanor entered the sale in her ledger without comment, but the heart of her projected true. Saleable octrine from her direct line remained elusive. Sarah's second child was another dark-skinned boy. Lily had a miscarriage. Frustration gnawed at Eleanor. She increased the pressure. She separated Sarah from her firstborn, Isaac, sending the toddler to the common nursery, claiming it was for his health. It was, in fact, to break Sarah's spirit, to make her more pliable, to force her to focus only on producing the right kind of child. Sarah's fiery resistance turned inwards, hardening into a steely, plotting resolve. She began eavesdropping on Eleanor's conversations, learning the rhythms of the house, the location of deeds, the patterns of the overseer's dot. One evening, hidden in the shadows of the loom house, she heard Jonathan bragging to a visiting planter from Alabama. My brother's got the delicate touch with the fancy maids, Jonathan sneered. But I'm the one building the dynasty. Mother's plan is genius. In a few years, Whitethorn stock will be fetching top dollar from Mississippi to Texas. It's all in the blood. The visiting man laughed, a coarse, knowing sound. Breeding your own N asterisk 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 asterisk. That's sharp business. Whitethorn. Sharp and sportin'. Sarah felt the words like physical blows. A dynasty. Whitethorn stock. Her children, Lily's children, were not even human to them. They were a product line. The cold stone of her hatred heated to a white-hot coal of vengeance. The catalyst came in the sweltering August of 1847. Lily was pregnant again, and this time she was visibly wasting away. The light in her eyes had dimmed to a flicker. William, in a rare moment of sober clarity, saw her carrying a basket of laundry from the big house. Her slight frame bowed under the weight, and the child. Something in him broke not with a dramatic snap, but with a quiet, final dissolution. That night, he confronted his mother in her accounting room. The ledgers were open, the columns of figures neat and damning. It has to stop, Mother. Eleanor did not look up from her desk. What has to stop, William? Profitability? This experiment. With Lily, with Sarah. Look at Lily. She's dying. Nonsense. Cora says she's healthy. She's simply prone to melancholy. The child she carries, however, shows promise. It will be lighter. It is a child, not it. William slammed his hand on the desk. We are committing a sin so profound it will curse this land for generations. Eleanor finally looked at him, her gaze icy. Sin is a concept for priests and weaklings. We are ensuring survival. Your father nearly lost Greenwood with his sentimentality and poor judgment. I have saved it. You will inherit an empire. Or would you rather inherit a pile of debts and the scorn of your peers? I would rather inherit my soul. Your soul. Eleanor gave a dry, contemptuous laugh. Your soul is fed by this cotton, clothed by this silk, housed by these bricks. Your soul dines on meat while they eat husks. Do not speak to me of souls, William. You agreed to this. Your signature is on every bill of sale, next to mine. The truth of it crushed him. His complicity was documented, legal, inescapable. He was not a captive. He was a collaborator. He stumbled from the room, not towards the decanter of brandy, but into the stifling night. He walked aimlessly until he found himself at the edge of the creek, near the breeding cabin. He saw a figure sitting alone on a stump. Sarah. She was staring at the moonlit water, her profile regal and impassive. Sarah. He whispered, the name foreign on his tongue. She turned slowly. There was no fear in her eyes, only a deep, weary assessment. Master William. The title was a lash. I am sorry. She was silent for a long time. Sorry don't feed my baby. Sorry don't unsell Chloe's boy with your gray eyes. Sorry is a ghost. It don't build nothing and it can't tear nothing down. Her words, so clear and precise, shocked him. You can read. He stated dumbly, I see, she said. I see everything. I see the books in your mother's room. I see the letters from New Orleans. I see the future she's writing for my children. A future on the block. William felt the ground shifting beneath him. Here was not a broken animal, but a strategist as keen as his mother, operating from a dungeon of oppression. A wild, impossible idea began to form. What if, he said, his voice trembling, what if you could stop her? Sarah's eyes locked onto his. What you offering, Master William? More sorry? Or you offering tools? It was the turning point. In that moonlit swamp, an alliance was forged not from friendship, but from mutual desperation and a shared enemy. William, the guilt-ridden idealist, and Sarah, the pragmatic revolutionary. He had access, information, legal standing. She had the trust of the quarters, the cunning, and the righteous cause. Their plan was audacious and dangerous. William would begin subtly altering copies of key documents, bills of sale, shipping manifests, creating a paper trail that would make it appear. Eleanor was defrauding her business partners and engaging in illegal slave speculation. Sarah would spread a carefully curated rumor among the most trusted slaves that a great storm was coming that would break Whitethorn's power, and they must be ready to move when the signal came. She also began, with William's covert help, to stop out small amounts of food, medicine, and a single, precious commodity, matches. Lily was the wild card. Her spirit was broken, but in her deepening detachment, she saw things others missed. She noticed the whispered conversations between William and Sarah by the creek. She saw the new, furtive light in Sarah's eyes. One afternoon, as they worked in the loom house, Lily touched Sarah's arm. Her voice was a bare whisper. You planning to burn it down? It was not a question. Sarah froze, then met Lily's hollow gaze. Slowly, she nodded. A faint ghost of a smile touched Lily's lips. Good, she breathed. The baby quickens. It feels different. It don't belong to her. Don't let it belong to her. The fire consumed 2/3 of Greenwood's harvest and the loom house. The main house was severely damaged. In the chaos, over 60 slaves escaped into the vast Georgia swamps, never to be recovered. Jonathan Whitethorn suffered a permanent, shaking weakness from the head wound. The story that reached the outside world was one of a tragic accident, a lantern kicked over by a clumsy slave, and a subsequent vicious insurrection. Eleanor Whitethorn was broken, not by the financial loss, which was catastrophic, but by the totality of the ruin. Her grand design lay in ashes. Her factory of fortune was a charred wreck. One son was a feeble-minded shell. The other had disappeared. Some said William died in the fire. Others whispered he'd fled north, disguised as an itinerant preacher, his mind shattered by guilt. A body was never found. She lived out her days in the scorched west wing of the house, a recluse, tormented by ghosts. The ledgers were ash. The future was ash. She died in 1853 of a fever that the new, timid doctor said was brought on by melancholia of the spirit. The legend of the Whitethorn curse entered local folklore. They said the land was poisoned, that the cries of wronged souls could be heard in the marshes. The plantation never recovered. It was sold for debt in 1860. Epilogue. 1865, the war was over. Union troops, a ragged column of blue, moved through Liberty County. A freedman, a tall, serious man named Isaac, now a scout for the Union Army, led them down an overgrown lane. "This is the place, Captain," he said. Greenwood, the mansion, was a blackened skeleton, its columns like broken teeth. Vines strangled the ruins. The scout dismounted, walking slowly through the debris. He had been born here. He had no memory of it. Only stories his mother had told him in the dead of night in their tiny cabin in Canada. Stories of fire and song and a woman named Sarah who carried her to freedom. His mother had died the previous winter, a free woman, her back forever scarred, but her spirit unbroken. On her deathbed, she had given him a name, a mission. If you ever go back, find the truth. Bury it or shout it, but know it. Isaac poked through the ashes of the collapsed accounting room with his boot. He uncovered a metal strongbox, warped by heat, but intact. With a rifle butt, he broke the lock. Inside, protected from the worst of the fire, were the last surviving ledgers of Eleanor Whitethorn. The pages were brittle, the ink faded. He flipped through them columns of names, prices, dates of birth. Then he found a separate, smaller journal, Eleanor's personal hand. He read entries that made his blood run cold. Jonathan with Bess, result, mail, sold to Raleigh, $900, promising Hugh, William with Lily. Result, miscarriage. A disappointment. Must try again before his resolve fails. And finally, an entry dated September 15th, 1847. The ink blurred as if by a splash of water or a tear. The project is ended. The asset Lily deceased in escape. The product, a female infant, lost. William is gone. The bloodline is severed. God forgive me, I see their faces in the flames. Isaac closed the book, his hands trembling. He looked at the ruins, at the silent, accusing land. He thought of his mother's strength, of the aunt he never knew, Lily, of the unknown cousin named Hope, whose fate was lost to the swamp. He thought of the twisted blood that might, somehow, also flow in his own veins. He took the journal. He did not burn it. He carried it with him, a testament not to the grandeur of the Whitethorns, but to the terrible, secret cost of the world they built, and to the fierce, unquenchable fire of those who finally brought it down. The truth was not a ghost to be feared. It was a weapon for the future. And as the warm Georgia sun beat down on the ashes of the past, Isaac, a free man, turned and led the soldiers on towards the work of building something new. The storm, when it broke, was not meteorological, but human. Eleanor's New Orleans factor, a shrewd Creole named Thibodeau, came to visit in late September. He wanted to inspect the new stock personally. Eleanor, proud as a queen, presented Sarah and Lily along with their children. Thibodeau examined Lily, palpating her belly with clinical indifference. The child will be very light, perhaps even passable, he mused. I have a client, a gentleman in Mobile, who is seeking a young companion for his wife. This one, he pointed to Sarah's firstborn, Isaac, now a sturdy 2-year-old, is too dark. Field hand. For the unborn one, we shall see after dinner, over port. Thibodeau grew expansive. Madam Whitethorn, your operation is impressive, but it lacks scale. I propose a partnership. We build a dedicated facility here, a breeding house. We bring in other robust females. Your sons provide the seed. We could produce 24 high-value infants a year. It would be a factory of fortune. Jonathan's eyes gleamed with avarice. William felt the port rise in his throat. Eleanor's smile was triumphant. An excellent proposition, Monsieur Thibodeau. We will draw up the papers tomorrow. That night, William knew the point of no return had been reached. A factory. His mother was going to industrialize her horror. He gave Sarah the prearranged signal, a single, specific candle placed in his bedroom window. Visible from the quarters, the secret plan was set for 3 nights later, during the harvest moon, when the fields were bright and the overseers would be busy with the final picking. It unraveled in minutes. A house slave girl, who secretly coveted William's attention, saw him leaving a bundle of food in a tinderbox by the old smithy. Hoping to win favor, she ran to Eleanor. Eleanor, with the cold fury of a betrayed monarch, did not confront William. She went straight to the breeding cabin with Jonathan and the overseers. They dragged Sarah and Lily into the yard. Where is it? Eleanor demanded, her voice like cracked ice. Where's what, Mrs.? Sarah asked, her voice steady. The contraband, the tools of rebellion. She nodded to the overseers. They ransacked the cabin, finding the pitiful, small stash of pilfered goods, a sack of rice, some salt, Cora's medicinal herbs, the matches. Eleanor picked up the matchbox. Fire, she said softly. You would burn my home, my legacy. She turned to Lily, who was trembling, clutching her swollen belly. Who else is involved? Was it my son? Was it William? Lily, in her terror and a final surge of protective fury for her unborn child, blurted out, He's gonna help us. He's gonna set us free. A deadly silence fell. Jonathan's face purpled with rage. That sniveling, treasonous, bring him, Eleanor commanded, her world collapsing inward. The biological tool of her dynasty had turned. It was the ultimate flaw in her calculation. She had tried to breach humanity out of the equation, but it had festered in her own son. William was hauled from the library. The scene in the torchlit yard was a tableau from hell. His mother, a statue of wrath. His brother, gripping a whip. The 2 women he had helped victimize, now facing brutal punishment because of him. You betrayed your blood, Eleanor said. Each word a nail in his coffin. You betrayed humanity, William choked out. Take him to the smokehouse, Eleanor ordered Jonathan. We will deal with him later. As for these 2, her eyes fell on Sarah and Lily. The breeding project is terminated. They are now insurrectionists. Jonathan, make an example, but be careful with Lily's product. It still has value. Jonathan grinned. He ordered the overseers to tie Sarah to the whipping post. He raised the dreaded cat, a nine-tailed whip embedded with fish hooks. But Sarah did not scream. As the first lash fell, tearing into her back, she raised her head and sang. It was a song from a homeland she'd never known, a deep, rhythmic spiritual about Moses and Pharaoh. Her voice, strong and clear, cut through the night, rolling over the quarters. It was the signal. Doors on slave cabins creaked open. Dark figures emerged, not rushing, but walking with a purposeful silence. They held hoes, axes, iron pokers from hearths. They had heard the rumors. They saw the torchlight. They heard Sarah's song of defiance. The unthinkable was happening. A coordinated stand. Jonathan, unnerved by the gathering crowd, turned from Sarah. "Get back to your cabins," he roared, "or you'll all feel the lash." A stone, thrown from the darkness, struck him on the temple. He staggered. Chaos erupted. In the confusion, William, his hands tied, lunged at the overseer guarding him, knocking him into the dirt. He scrambled, not towards freedom, but towards the bundle by the smithy. He grabbed the tinder box. Eleanor saw him. William, nitrogen monoxide. He looked at her, his mother, the architect of his damnation. In that moment, he saw not a powerful matriarch, but a hollow woman living in a house of cards built on flesh and suffering. He struck a match. He did not throw it at the big house. He threw it into the dry, tinder-like cotton storehouse next to the loom house, the repository of the season's first harvest, the very symbol of Greenwood's wealth. The flame caught with a soft whoop, then erupted into a roaring inferno. The orange light illuminated the scene in a hellish glow. The fighting, the screaming, Sarah struggling against her bonds. Lily crouched on the ground, Eleanor standing frozen as her fortune went up in flames. The fire. Someone yelled. The whole crop. Pandemonium ensued. Overseers ran for buckets. Slaves saw their chance and melted into the woods. Jonathan bellowed contradictory orders. Clutching his bleeding head, Sarah, seeing her chance, worked her raw wrist against the ropes with desperate strength. An old man from the quarters, wielding a hatchet, slipped from the shadows and severed her bonds. She stumbled free, her back a lattice of blood. Her first thought was not escape. It was Lily. She found her, huddled by the post, her face a mask of pain. "The baby, it's coming," Lily gasped. Cora materialized from the chaos, her face grim. "We gotta move." Now, Sarah and Cora half carried, half dragged Lily away from the blazing light, into the relative darkness of the Live Oak Alley. Under the massive, weeping trees, as Greenwood burned behind them, Lily delivered her child. It was a girl. She was, as Thibodeau had predicted, very light, with a find out of pale hair. Lily, with her last ounce of strength, held the infant to her chest. She looked at Sarah, her eyes clear for the first time in years. "Name her Hope," she whispered. Then the light faded from her eyes. She was gone, Sarah, cradling the newborn, her own body screaming in pain. Look back at the plantation. The main house was catching now, flames licking up its white pillars. She saw Eleanor, a small, black figure, standing on the veranda, not fleeing, just watching it all burn. William was nowhere to be seen. Cora touched her arm. "The swamp. We go now, or we die." Sarah nodded. With the old midwife's help, she wrapped baby Hope in a strip of her own torn dress. She took one last look at the hell that had birthed and nearly broken her. Then she turned her back on Greenwood and vanished into the tidal marshes, following the secret paths to freedom that the Gullah people knew.